The committee will come to order. We have to adjourn today's hearing shortly before 11 a.m. so members can attend the memorial service for our late colleague John Murtha. Given the relatively short time we have to spend with our distinguished witness, I'll limit opening statements to myself and the ranking member. All other members may submit written statements for the record. Dr. Shah, I'm very pleased to welcome you for your first formal appearance before this committee and your first time testifying before the Congress as USAID Administrator. Less than 2 weeks after being sworn in, you were made the Obama administration's point person in responding to the almost unimaginable tragedy in Haiti. Dealing with a crisis of that magnitude would be a tall order no matter how long you had served as an administrator, and by all accounts, you stepped up to the task with great aptitude and aplomb. Prior to your confirmation, USAID had been without a permanent administrator for an extended period. So we particularly appreciate the leadership you have demonstrated and the experience and dynamism you bring to the job. Our focus today is on the President's fiscal year 2011 budget request, and specifically the policies and programs for development that USAID is responsible for designing and implementing. Secretary Clinton has rightfully identified diplomacy and development as two key pillars of our national security, along with defense. We make it a priority to reduce poverty and alleviate human suffering around the world because it is the morally right thing to do and because it reflects the compassion and generosity of the American people. But foreign assistance programs also serve our economic and national security interests. Poor and unstable countries make unreliable trading partners, offer weak markets for U.S. goods and services. Conflict, lawlessness, and extremism that threaten U.S. interests find fertile ground in the places where basic human needs are not being met and fundamental human rights are not respected. Done right, development assistance is a sound investment in a better, safer world. One of my legislative priorities is to reform our foreign assistance laws and programs to ensure that aid reaches those who need it most and that it is delivered with maximum effectiveness and efficiency. Our development assistance should aim not only to improve the lives of poor people, but to build the human capacity and the economic and political institutions that will sustain these gains. I look forward to working with you as we write legislation to replace the outdated and cumbersome legal structure that currently exists with one designated to meet the needs of the 21st century. The administration is now in the midst of two reviews that will have some bearing on this process. The Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, or QDDR, seeks to define the capabilities that are needed and to match resources with priorities. The Presidential Study Directive, known as PSD7, will, we hope, produce a national strategy for global development that establishes clear and specific objectives for United States policies and programs consistent with the Millennium Development Goals. We should strive to achieve those goals not only in countries where the risk of violent extremism is most pronounced, but everywhere that children go hungry, women die in childbirth for lack of skilled assistance, and communities are ravaged by a preventable disease. I'm particularly gratified that the President's budget places an emphasis on global health, food security, and climate change. These are areas where the international community faces significant challenges and where we know how to make a real difference. They build on one of the great foreign policy legacies of the previous administration, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. To ensure that our assistance is as effective as possible, we must elevate and strengthen USAID. I applaud Secretary Clinton's call to rebuild USAID into the world's premier development agency. We also must make good on President Bush's pledge to double the size of the USAID Foreign Service, a goal that President Obama has also endorsed. To put the budget numbers in perspective, the entire international affairs budget accounts for just over 1% of federal spending, and only about a third of that 1% is allocated to development and humanitarian programs. One overarching goal of our foreign assistance is to reduce the need for putting American soldiers in harm's way. About 18% of the entire international affairs budget and about 60% of the growth since last year is for the frontline states of Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. By building schools, training police, and increasing agricultural production, we help lay the foundations for a more stable future in these volatile nations. It's an investment well worth making, considering the savings and long-term costs in American blood and treasure. With this in mind, the increases for fiscal year 2011 are quite modest and I think extremely well justified. Dr. Shah, we appreciate having you here this morning. Look forward to your testimony. But first, I would like to turn to the ranking member, Eliana Ross-Lehtinen, for any opening remarks that she might want to make.
Thank you. As always, Mr. Chairman, thanks for the opportunity. And Dr. Shah, I join in welcoming you to our Foreign Affairs Committee. With the recent tragedy in Haiti and the intensive, rapid efforts to help the people of that devastated country, you've had a bracing introduction to your current position. And as I had said to you in the side room, you've represented our humanitarian country so well, and I commend you for an exemplary USAID mission in Haiti. You hit the ground running. So we wish you well in all of your endeavors on behalf of our nations and those that it seeks to help throughout the world. I am, however, disappointed that the congressional budget justification for your agency is not yet available, so it places us at a disadvantage today in discussing the fiscal year 2011 budget request for AID because we lack that information. But necessity is the mother of invention. The past year has seen a dramatic deterioration in our nation's economic position. Should the President's proposed budget for fiscal year 2011 be adopted without any changes, the debt created in next year alone will equal an additional $4,000 owed by every man, woman, and child in the United States. This on top of the $40,000 that each American already effectively owes through the public debt. We're now borrowing at a rate of about $4 billion a day to keep our government in operation. This is not the best position for our country to be in. In light of this situation, I recommended to Secretary Clinton last week that although our aid programs are not a major part of the overall budget, we need to find places where we can slow down or freeze spending. We have this opportunity to foster innovation. I believe that the seeds for this innovation are already contained in some of AID's programs. They just need to be expanded to allow us to move away from more costly assistance programs that work through wasteful and often corrupt bureaucracies abroad, and so often create dependency and breed stagnation among recipient countries. Instead of continuing with such tremendous reliance on AID's traditional development assistance account, for example, we might instead consider moving quickly to expand our development credit assistance program, which at a far less cost leverages tremendous private funding in pursuit of our development goals. In line with that, we might also consider expanding AID's Global Development Alliances program, an approach that is once again built on leveraging private funds and pursuing development goals without creating aid dependency in other countries. In short, we have to do more with less. There are additional innovations out there, many of them based on technological advances of the past 2 decades, of which AID is either already experimenting with or should consider. And I'll cite some examples. Improvements in marketing by small-scale farmers and shop owners in impoverished countries by means of cell phone alerts. The development also of affordable, small-scale clean energy power generators that can be run off the electrical grid in remote areas. Also, small-scale vouchers for farmers, allowing them to break free from the control by huge bureaucratic and often corrupt ministries in obtaining seed and other farm inputs. AID is working in many of these areas, but we need to think of how we can intensify it to focus on such small-scale programs which can unleash individuals' creativity rather than continuing to interact with unaccountable bureaucratic government agencies abroad. And we should also consider ways to multiply the impact of such small-scale programs wherever possible, implementing the approach used in our microfinance, microcredit programs, where even the poorest beneficiaries are expected to repay some of their assistance to cooperative groups that can then, in turn, provide such assistance to others. Small businesses and individual opportunities are what help America grow into the prosperous country that we are, long before there was a theory of development. It's time to revisit our longstanding views and theories on how to help the impoverished around the world become self-sustaining and prosperous. I hope that the challenges of addressing our fiscal deterioration here at home will lead us to truly explore ways to be more efficient, accomplish our goals at less cost, but with more benefit for those who deserve our help. And I thank you again, Dr. Shah, for what you've done in Haiti. I know that you're standing up already a new program in Chile in far different circumstances, but I congratulate your entire team at USAID. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Ross-Layton. And now I'm happy to introduce Dr. Rajiv Shah. He's the 16th Administrator of the United States Agency for International Development. Prior to his confirmation as Administrator, he served for about 6 months as Undersecretary of Agriculture for Research, Education, and Economics, and Chief Scientist. A medical doctor and health economist by training, Dr. Shah previously spent 7 years with the Gates Foundation, holding leadership positions in its agricultural development and global health programs. Dr. Shah, your entire statement will be made part of the record, and we look forward to hearing your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Berman, Ranking Member Ross-Layton, and members of the committee. I'm honored to join you here today in support of the President's fiscal year 2011 Foreign Operations Budget request. In the interest of time, please allow me to summarize the key points of my testimony and submit the full text for the record. As you know, just days after my swearing in, the people of Haiti were struck by a tragedy of almost unimaginable proportions. This past weekend, Chile suffered a devastating earthquake as well. Our thoughts and prayers, as are yours, are with the people of Chile and Haiti as we provide humanitarian relief and assistance. In the aftermath of the earthquake in Haiti, our President Obama designated me to lead our overall federal response and charged our government with mounting a swift, aggressive, and coordinated effort. In that capacity, USAID coordinated a multi-agency effort with the Departments of State, Defense, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Agriculture, and many other federal partners. With these partners, we launched the largest and most successful international urban search and rescue effort ever, created a robust urban food distribution system that reached more than 3 million individuals with critical food supplies, greatly increased the nation's infrastructure, especially at the ports and the airport, and coordinated medical assistance support, including direct treatment for more than 30,000 patients, and performed hundreds of surgeries, saving lives and limbs. Haiti faces a long and steep road to recovery, and as the operations transition from rescue to recovery, we will continue to stand by the people of Haiti and appreciate the support of this committee and the Congress in doing so. At the same time, we will not lose sight of the other priorities, including the important work that USAID does to help other countries achieve their development goals, and the critical need to strengthen our capacity and accountability in pursuit of this mission. The investments we make today are a bulwark against current and future threats, both seen and unseen, and a down payment for future peace and prosperity around the world. As President Obama said in Oslo last December, security does not exist when people do not have access to enough food or clean water or the medicine and shelter they need to survive. Secretary Clinton strongly shares this view and has asked us to elevate development to stand with diplomacy and defense as part of our nation's foreign policy. Together with other government agencies, USAID is examining our resources and capabilities to determine how best to achieve these development objectives. We're doing so through the Presidential Study Directive on U.S. Development Policy, the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, and through consultations with congressional committees that are pursuing foreign assistance reform. The fiscal year 2011 budget request will support development priorities that contribute directly to our national security. Specifically, our request is focused on 3 priority areas: securing critical frontline states, meeting urgent global challenges, and enhancing aid effectiveness and accountability. Allow me to summarize each briefly. First, in critical frontline states, we propose spending $7.7 billion in state and USAID assistance in support of development efforts in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. We have made some progress in each of these countries, but we realize that significant challenges remain. Over the past several years, our focus in Afghanistan has been achieving greater stability and security. We are beginning to see major improvements in healthcare, education, and agriculture, as well as, in some cases, the foundation of a more representative and democratic government. The administration's funding request is part of the President's Afghanistan strategy and designed to encourage stability and opportunity in that nation. In Pakistan, our request supports ongoing efforts to combat extremism, promote economic opportunity, strengthen democratic institutions, and build a long-term relationship with the Pakistani people. Here, too, our programs are helping to achieve significant improvements in education and health. The funding increase in FY 2011 for Pakistan will help USAID reach approximately 60,000 more children with nutrition programs, increased enrollment in both primary and secondary schools by over 1 million learners, and support 500,000 rural households to improve agricultural production. In Iraq, we have transitioned to a new phase in our civilian assistance relationship, shifting away from reconstruction toward the provision of assistance to bolster local capacity in line with Iraqi priorities. USAID is promoting economic development, strengthening the agriculture sector, which is the largest employer of Iraqis after the government of Iraq, and increasing the capacity of local and national governments to provide essential services. Our second budget priority is focused on meeting urgent global challenges. $14.6 billion in state and aid assistance will support local and global solutions to core transnational problems, including global health, extreme poverty, natural and man-made disasters, and threats of further instability from climate change and rapid population growth. In global health, we are requesting $8.5 billion in state and aid assistance. Our request supports the President's Global Health Initiative. With this additional funding, we will build on our strong record of success in HIV/AIDS treatment, tuberculosis, and malaria control, and seek to achieve improved results in areas where progress has lagged, such as obstetric care, newborn care, and basic nutrition. In food security, we are proposing to invest $1.2 billion for state and aid food security and agriculture programs, in addition to $200 million set aside for nutrition. With these additional funds, we will work in countries in Africa, Central America, and Asia to combat poverty and hunger. In climate change, we propose to invest $646 million for state and aid programs, part of the administration's overall $1.4 billion request to support climate change assistance. USAID will support the implementation of sustainable landscape investments, as well as developing low-carbon development strategies for critical countries, market-based approaches to sustainable energy sector reform, and capacity building and technology development to enhance adaptation and resilience strategies. In humanitarian assistance, aid and state propose to invest $4.2 billion. This funding allows us to assist internally displaced persons, refugees, and victims of armed conflict and natural disasters worldwide, such as the tragic earthquakes in Haiti and Chile. With these combined investments, we will save lives and help make people less vulnerable to both poverty and the threat of instability that extreme poverty breeds. Our third major budget priority focuses on enhancing USAID's effectiveness and accountability by investing $1.7 billion in the ongoing rebuilding effort for USAID's personnel and infrastructure. All of the priorities I have outlined require strong capacities in evaluation, planning, strategic resource management, and research to ensure we are incorporating the best practices, innovations, and technologies from the field. We also must be able to recruit, hire, and retain best-in-class development professionals. By reducing our reliance on contractors to design and evaluate programs, we will not only save taxpayer dollars, but also enable greater oversight and more effective program implementation. Through these critical investments, we can achieve the development goals we have set around the world and restore USAID's standing as the world's premier development agency. I know this is a time of great economic strain for so many Americans. For every dollar we invest, we must show results. That is why this budget supports programs vital to our national security and our ability to account for outcomes. The United States must be able to exercise global leadership to help countries as they develop more stable and sustainable foundations for security, stability, and well-being. This requires the effective use of all instruments of our national security, including development. And this requires a relentless focus on results and accountability, a focus we embrace with enthusiasm. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions, your guidance, and your ongoing consultation.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your vision and the specifics that fill it out, and I'll yield myself 5 minutes to begin the questioning. Dr. Shah, could you give us an update on the status of the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review and the Presidential Study Directive on Global Development Policy? And most specifically, when can we receive the findings, and will they be made public?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those questions. The QDDR has completed now its first phase of work, which was structured around a broad set of exploratory conversations and brainstorming related to 5 core working group topic areas relating to how the United States projects its power and its smart power and its diplomatic and development capacities around the world. As we transition, we are in the process of transitioning to a series of more operationally oriented task forces that will be addressing specific topics like how we improve our ability to do policy planning, how we develop real systems for accountability and budgeting, how we help our country missions and our country chiefs of mission develop long-term investment strategies for development and diplomacy, and have the flexibility to partner more effectively with the private sector, with sources of innovation, and with country governments themselves. The results of those more specific operational efforts should be available in the April-May timeframe. We, at this point, do hope to have deep and ongoing conversations both about the content of the QDDR as well as learning from the committees in the Congress around a range of views on some of these core issues. And that is an ongoing process, but one that has shifted from a larger strategic conversation to a more focused set of operational discussions. The Presidential Study Directive is similarly making the same transition after having completed a series of phases of work that brought together 16 to 18 different agencies throughout the federal government to discuss ideas and concepts in a more open space related to the future of development. That is now transitioning into also a more operational focus to come up with specific constructs that will define the development strategy of this administration going forward. These two processes come together in a number of different ways, not least of which are deputies committees that we participate in, but also just the key individuals that are part of both of these processes are often the same individuals.
And the PSD, when do you think that process, you mentioned April.
Yeah.
A notional idea of April for the QDDR. What about the PSD?
Well, I should clarify. I don't think the QDDR will be complete in April, but I think we will have enough specifics to begin a serious consultation on a set of ideas in that time frame. On the PSD, I would expect the same thing, although I shouldn't speak on behalf of the National Security Council. I think they can identify a more specific timeline, and we could come back to you with a specific answer on that.
I would appreciate that. In order to fund Haiti's relief effort, you had to borrow money from other humanitarian programs across the globe until the supplemental funding arrives. Everyone understands the overwhelming needs in Haiti, but the fact is these transfers have created some hardships and delays on the ground in other countries, such as Sudan and Congo. What is being done to ensure that other humanitarian emergencies aren't being neglected in order to address the tragedy in Haiti?
Well, I appreciate that question, sir, and I believe the United States government has already committed more than $600 million to the effort in Haiti, and as you point out, that a large percentage of that has come from the IDA account that provides the flexible and rapid funding. We will seek in a supplemental to reconstitute the IDA account as fully as possible in this context. We've been in close contact with our implementing partners in other complex crises around the world and have asked them not to delay or slow down program implementation, working under the assumption that those additional resources will arrive prior to the June timeframe, which is when we would have to start making those trade-offs that we hope not to make. So I am aware that a number of partners felt they might have to do that. We've tried to be in touch with everyone who's reached out to us to indicate that they should not slow down programs in other areas, that we expect the supplemental to reconstitute IDA in a manner.
So you're really saying the assumption of my question is wrong. There has not been deprivation in other programs as a result of the transfer.
That is correct, sir. I believe there have been, I know that partners have reached out to us asking if they should, and when we did, we tried to correct that misperception right away.
Okay. My time has expired. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to touch on Cuba, Haiti, West Bank, and Gaza, all in 5 minutes. No problem, right, Dr. Shah? I'm concerned that with the arrest and the imprisonment of U.S. citizen Alan Gross, that AID programs in Cuba may have come to a standstill. If we could get a commitment from you, Dr. Shah, that AID is going to continue to carry out U.S. democracy programs in Cuba, I would appreciate that. On Haiti, following up on the chairman's questions, how should the cost of the recovery, response, and long-term development efforts in Haiti be shared among donor countries? And what portion of the overall aid effort for Haiti over the coming years should the U.S. be expected to provide? 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever figures you think. And lastly, on the West Bank and Gaza, the administration has requested another over $400 million in economic support funds for West Bank and Gaza, but as we have seen, there's been a lot of stealing of those funds. It's not been managed well. What kind of vetting do we have in place to ensure that the funding does not benefit violent extremists, corrupt officials, and instead reaches its intended targets? What kind of metrics are we using to ensure that we can actually accomplish what we seek to do with the funding? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate those questions. On Cuba in particular, I think we can strongly affirm our commitment to execute our programs and our priorities. We've taken a number of steps working with the State Department to try to address the needs of Mr. Gross. I've been in direct contact with DAI, the partner for whom he was contracted to work with, and we've worked directly with a range of our other partners to ensure that they, given the challenging travel situation, that they come up with alternative solutions to execute and implement these programs, and we're giving them the flexibility to do that. So we are fully committed to seeing through the program there. On Haiti, I appreciate your points and your earlier comments there as well. We have been approximately half of the overall early relief effort. A large part of that is the Department of Defense, the costs related to Department of Defense assets, including the Marines, the Comfort Hospital ship, the effort to rebuild the port and the airport. Those were mission-critical early activities that were required for other assistance to come in. As we transition through recovery reconstruction, we expect that percentage will go down significantly. And we are working with a range of major bilateral partners, but also the World Bank as part of the post-disaster needs assessment to make sure there's a strong plan going forward that's unveiled at the Donors Conference later in March this month, and that U.S. assistance is targeted and a far more modest percentage of the overall aspiration, of the overall needs. It will be a small percentage, but our leadership will be critical, and our technical support and our deep engagement in this process will be continued and unwavering. On World Bank and Gaza, I appreciate the question as well. As you know, we have systems for both tracking partners and vetting partners. The partner vetting system there involves specific identification of names of of partners. It involves our database tracking systems, and we vet that very, very carefully. That system's been in place for more than 2 years. On the cash tracking, we also have a very specific system that's been in place for more than 4 years, where we are supporting and we authorize specific disbursements from the Palestinian Authority. The resources are transferred quite closely from a bank in Israel to a special treasury account in the Palestinian banking system, and then all flows out of that are monitored on a case-by-case basis. So there's a very strong system in place for tracking cash flows in that environment as well. And our budget request going forward is to really focus on doing specific work that will achieve real outcomes in infrastructure and in health and in humanitarian support in Gaza. And I'm happy to describe that some of the things we've done have been successful, building 60 kilometers of road in the West Bank, funding 7 schools that are operational and effective, and promoting a broadly based health system in that region that is reaching many, many more people in need. So we'll continue to track those outcomes very closely, but we have special systems for tracking how we work with partners and how we track the flow of cash.
Thank you so much. And the emphasis should always be to make sure that it's a transparent, accountable system of aid that is not corrupted by the corrupt officials in the West Bank and Gaza. Thank you, Dr. Shah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, the chairman of the Africa and Global Health Subcommittee, Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. And let me also commend you for the outstanding job that you have done in Haiti. Also, I wish we didn't have a debt. We do have to remember we had a balanced budget when President Clinton left. However, a war in Iraq, which was unnecessary, and big tax cuts put us in the position we're in today, unfortunately. Let me just say about the Global Fund. I see that you've cut $50 million from the Global Fund, and I wonder if you'd look at that, because as you know, the UN formulas are 1/3 U.S. That means $150 million will be cut overall when the other nations participate. Secondly, on the neglected tropical diseases, although you're dealing with them, some of the most neglected, such as fatal visceral meniasis, sleeping sickness, the Charges disease, and some of these other disfiguring Barula ulcers are not covered, and I wonder if they could be included in that. Just real quickly on 3 governance groups, Somalia with the transitional federal government, I wonder, will there be a significant increase in development aid, because we have to support this government or we're going to be in my opinion, very serious problems if they fall. All of East Africa, as you know, Somaliland, Puntland, and Somalia, in my opinion, will go. Secondly, are we concentrating enough on South Sudan if in 2011 they decide to secede? How will we support the new government with additional funds? And finally, Liberia needs to have some consideration where we have strong institutions. We see elections work like South Africa and other places. Where we don't, they fail. So if you could look at Liberia, the historical relationship between the U.S. and Liberia is important. And finally, I'd like to know how you're making out with AFRICOM and the coordination. With that, I'll just stop so that you can answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, on the Global Fund in particular, and that's in the context of the larger Global Health Initiative, we're committed to significant financial increases against global health, and even more than that, using those resources in a way that will be more effective against those lagging indicators within the MDGs, like maternal mortality and newborn and obstetric care. We're working with the Global Fund, with the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization and other vertical programs to try to accelerate the partnerships between them and get more value out of the overall investment. The overall administration request on the Global Fund is $1 billion because it, of course, includes the Treasury component, and we'll be very committed to helping the Global Fund succeed. On neglected tropical diseases, I will take your comments as advisement and look specifically into those cases. That's a unique area where I do believe we could have, and we've been in discussions with private partners to accelerate public-private partnerships and meet the overall needs as they've been delineated by the World Health Organization and others, and that's very much a priority of the Global Health Initiative. On Somalia, we will, in terms of increases in development assistance, as you know, most of our assistance is humanitarian at this point, is flowing through the north. We continue to be in close conversation with the World Food Program to explore what can be done and when it can be done in other parts of Somalia, and we look to use our development assistance in a strategic manner. I will follow up more specifically on what we could do to be more expansive in that context. With Southern Sudan, we have $95 million for the referendum and for support for the referendum, and we're doing a series of activities with respect to capacity building and serving the people of Southern Sudan. I will note that our mission is in that region there, and unlike other partners, even multilateral partners that are trying to serve that region from farther away, we feel that we're very well positioned to play a critical role should the needs arise, as you've identified. And so we are doing contingency planning around that and also identifying what kind of budget flexibility we would have and what the needs would be. But we think we'd have an important role in leading that effort. We think we'd have an important role in bringing other donors and multilateral institutions to that mission, should that be the outcome of the early 2011 referendum. I'll take your comments on Liberia as guidance. And on AFRICOM, we continue to be in discussion with them and do hope to have a strongly coordinated operational effort in Africa with them. I personally visited them this summer and hope to continue that conversation.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Shah, thank you for being here. I'm over here, over the far right to you. First of all, I want to commend the workers in the field in USAID. I've traveled, like everybody else in this committee, all over, and they are the greatest ambassadors for the United States and freedom that we have, are those people in the field. And I know that USAID is developing all kinds of things. Most recently, the farmers down there at Texas A&M invented some kind of soybean that now yields 9 times what they used to yield for Afghanistan, so that the farmers in Afghanistan don't have to raise poppies. They can raise soybeans that were invented at Texas A&M. I mean, that's all good things. Those are all good. I am concerned about, though, being good stewards of money. Last week we had before us the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, Stuart Bowen, and he said that in reconstruction of Iraq there was, and there is, $4 billion unaccounted for. And I asked him which of all the agencies that are in Iraq from the United States has the worst record of accountability, and he said the State Department. Of course, the example he used was the $2.5 billion that went to DynCorp for training police officers, and there's no records. We have no records about where that $2.5 billion went. And so I'm concerned about the unaccountability of money we send. And I also asked him about, could some of that money have turned up in the hands of our enemies like Al-Qaeda? And he mentioned that there were 14,000 Glock weapons that disappeared from our possession to somewhere else. That troubles me when we have our men and women in uniform overseas trying to protect us, and guns that we ship over there end up in their hands because our federal agencies aren't good stewards of the money. So you want an increase in the budget. We have 15 million Americans unemployed. It seems like, to me, when some country is in trouble, of course, they call 1-800-USAID to come over and help them out. That's what we kind of do in this country. The government and the people of this country are the most giving of any nation in history. But I would like for you to specifically address this problem of accountability. And how do we know that this money is going to be accounted for, that thieves aren't going to steal it, that crooked contractors aren't going to steal it, and the bad guys aren't going to end up with some of the aid that we send to foreign countries, similar to some of the questions that the ranking member addressed in other parts of the world. So how about that, Dr. Shaw?
Thank you, sir. We have, I want to thank you for your comments about our staff and also acknowledge that our Foreign Service nationals in that context do make us awfully proud. I also want to address your comment about Texas A&M. We are proposing in this budget an increase in our agricultural research and development as it relates to meeting the needs in some of these priority countries in food security. With respect to Iraq reconstruction, the contract you referred to, I would just point out that for USAID, we have a shifting strategy where we are moving towards supporting the elections that are upcoming and providing real support to the government and the health system and other meeting basic human needs and the needs of IDP populations. We're also more aggressively pursuing matching fund requirements to make sure that our resources are being matched by the government of Iraq. And we have strong financial accountability and procurement systems in place that are tracked very closely in that context. In general, your point
Excuse me, Dr. Shaw, are these accountability, are these accounting procedures new? Are they the same ones where...
No, many of them are new over the course of the last year. Some of them evolved and are based on some learnings. There are 4 basic strategies we use to track and ensure accountability. I agree they could be more transparent, and it's one of my priorities to make them more effective and transparent. One is selectivity. We have rigorous systems for making sure we only work with those partners, especially in Afghanistan and Pakistan, that where we can track the resources and have confidence in effectiveness of spending. A second is around capacity building, particularly in financial management and procurement systems, both reform and tracking. A third is on monitoring, and a fourth is on auditing, which we do in a multiple manner system in those places.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Thank you, Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Dr. Shah. It's great having you here, and I thank you for and commend you for all of your efforts, especially in helping Haiti with the aftermath of the devastating earthquake. You talked about how complex it is in dealing with Haiti. I would like first to ask you the question, can you describe for us the international aspect of the effort to help Haiti? Specifically, what I'm interested in is the coordination of efforts, the coordination of funds, who's leading that effort, where do we go from here, and what role can the Haitian government play, and how do we support that government until it has the capacity to take on more or most of the responsibility? I know that there's a number of international communities that are calling for a Haiti Marshall Plan. And I myself have put in a resolution calling for a Haiti Marshall Plan. So I'd like to know what your thoughts are on whether or not we do need to do that clarion call and whether Haiti needs a Marshall Plan. And then I just want to ask also, in the short time that we have, about Afro-Latinos in the Western Hemisphere. You know that the Obama administration has finalized the signing of the U.S.-Colombia Joint Action Plan on Racial and Ethnic Equality, and we've had one on Brazil, of which I've asked you also to get the report on that so that we can continue to follow that. I know we're still making progress, but over the years, I have requested appropriators that from the USAID that funds be specifically directed toward helping the marginalized communities in Latin America. And more often than not, those are disproportionately means they're Afro-Latinos and indigenous populations. So I'd like to know, can you tell me about your plans to address the plight of African Latinos and indigenous populations? And have you prioritized the plans from the budget perspective? And finally, and real briefly, I'm also concerned about trade capacity and trade capacity dollars. So can you tell me if there are any plans to more comprehensively coordinate trade capacity dollars across the various departments and agencies that have these funds? I have proposed, for example, that we create an office for trade capacity coordination. I'd like to know your thoughts of this kind of function.
Thank you for those comments and questions. I'll start with Haiti. The international aspect is being led by the government of Haiti, working with an internationally recognized system of UN clusters that are established sector by sector. We play a key role in each of the clusters and directly with the government of Haiti. We also, in some cases, like rubble removal for the establishment of safe places in advancing of in where the floods are coming in, or in food distribution or water distribution, at times when, frankly, we felt the clusters needed more support, we've stepped in and offered more capacity and more directed leadership from our military-civilian partnership in Haiti. So that is how it's being coordinated on an international aspect. In terms of the plan forward, the Haitian government has had a plan most recently unveiled last spring and also revised and updated for last fall, which was based on a decentralization of the population outside of Port-au-Prince and creating vibrant economic opportunities and centers of economic activity outside of Port-au-Prince. We expect them to unveil that plan in a more updated and specific form at the upcoming donors conference, and believe that does constitute the groundwork for a very strong reconstruction effort that will hopefully build back a more vibrant and more effective economy, governance system, and ability to meet human needs in Port-au-Prince, and perhaps more importantly, to the majority of the population outside of Port-au-Prince. In terms of your comments about Afro-Latinos in the Western Hemisphere, it's absolutely true and completely recognized by our agency that those marginalized communities are disproportionately suffering on health and human indicators of welfare and well-being throughout the hemisphere, and that's a clear and statistically straightforward point. I will come back to you more specifically on how our budget addresses that, but in our efforts to address food security, global health, and meeting basic human needs, we are disproportionately targeting those marginalized populations. How that plays out in terms of budget numbers, I will come back to you more specifically. And finally, on trade capacity building and coordination, I do believe that we need more effective coordination in that context. We've been in a conversation as part of the Presidential Study Directive and in efforts like our Food Security Initiative to explore how we can improve the integration of our trade policy, our trade capacity investments, and our investments in agriculture and high-value agriculture to get more bang for buck in our development spending. Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Dr. Shah, thank you for your testimony. About 12 years ago, Dr. Shah, I initiated an effort on the whole issue of autism at a time when very few people were paying attention to it. And it led to the creation of Centers of Excellence. Matter of fact, I wrote the provisions for the Centers of Disease Control, and we quickly found that we may have an epidemic of about 1 out of every 100 of our children have autism or part of the Asperger spectrum. I've since been focusing on the international elements of autism, and to my not shock, but certainly to my and I think many other people's dismay, have realized that we have a global epidemic of autism. I'm working with a number of NGOs in Nigeria, in Kenya, Indonesia, Poland, and in Ireland in trying to combat autism, and what all of these organizations have is a deficiency in funding. Lots of thought, a lot of good expertise, but lack of funding. I have introduced legislation, H.R. 1878, about a year ago, that will provide a small grants program and also a Teach the Teachers program. And I'm asking you if you would take a good, long, hard look at these NGOs. I'm sure you have the authority, absent the legislation, to assist these NGOs, and I'll give you one on defeating autism in Nigeria. I know some of the people involved with an NGO there. They suggest that there may be as many as 1 million Nigerians who have autism. So I would ask you to take a good, hard look at this and provide some assistance there. Secondly, on your 3 priority areas, you talk about instability from rapid population growth. And I would respectfully request that you take a second look at the issue of depopulation. In places all over Europe, Russia, the UN estimates that by the year 2050, 25% lower population than that which currently exists in Russia. Same way with all of the Eastern European countries. We're seeing a depopulation trend, and the reason why the aggregate continues to grow is that we're living longer. It's not about births, it's about the other side of the spectrum. In South Korea, they are so far below replacement. Japan has the same problem, that they're looking at a serious disproportionality when it comes to workers and those who are on the other end of the spectrum receiving benefits. So I think your underlying assumption has been surpassed in many ways by a depopulation trend that is very injurious, I think, to individual countries. And in China, where the sex selection abortions has led to gendercide, as many as 100 million missing girls, a whole unique set of problems have developed there. As many as 40 million men will not be able to find wives by 2020 because they're gone, they're dead, as a result of sex selection, abortion, and one-child per couple policy. That is a crime against women of gargantuan proportions. And so I would ask you to look at maybe some of the underlying assumptions about population growth. There is a depopulation trend that is very, very dangerous. Finally, on obstetric fistula, I pushed very hard with Dr. Ken Hill when he was at USAID on behalf of building out the ability to meet women's real needs when they have obstetric fistula. Getting the surgeries that are very low cost and high impact gives the woman her life back. Like many of my colleagues, I've been to the hospital in Addis, I've been to other obstetric hospitals. Can you give us an assurance that you will not only continue that money, it was $12 million at the time, but hopefully significantly expand it? I yield.
Thank you for those comments and questions. On autism, I will be happy to look at the NGOs you're proposing, and we can do that in a systematic manner. I do believe the principles of the Global Health Initiative, which is to broaden the scope of how we think about supporting health systems and setting priorities based on medical need and based on what are the biggest lagging indicators against Millennium Development Goals, will help guide our work in the health sector overall going forward, and I appreciate your comments on that issue. On instability from population growth, I do believe the 2050 population projections are significant. They do show, over 9 billion as a global population. And I think consistent with your comments, they show that those increases will happen in certain parts of the world, and certain parts of the world will stay flat and in some cases decrease. So I appreciate that, and we'll take a nuanced look at that very specifically. Some of your comments related to gender and girls in that context, which is an immediate priority for our team and for the Secretary. And on obstetric fistula, I do believe our Global Health Initiative, in its reprioritization of obstetric care, of skilled attendance at birth, and of focusing on the needs of women and girls, will create a strong strategic priority in that space. Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Shah, let me first of all commend you and the Obama administration for the very quick response to the situation in Haiti. I'd like to ask you a few questions about that, if I may. First of all, as of today, how much money has USAID spent in the disaster relief in Haiti?
I believe the overall federal commitment has been just over $600 million, maybe just over $630 million. We could get you a very specific number. Of that amount, I think USAID has spent approximately $350 million, with the majority of the alternative part of that being Department of Defense spending.
Which leads to my next question. Where has that money been spent by category?
I'd have to provide you a more specific breakdown, but the major areas have been out of our disaster relief account, which immediately supported priorities for urban search and rescue. We sent our 2 trained international urban search and rescue teams, but also 4 or 5 other teams that were stood up by FEMA, so that we had at any one time more than 500 American search and rescue professionals with heavy equipment and specialized training at work for an extended period of time. We made significant investments in the health space, spending resources to take disaster medical assistance teams from the Department of Health and Human Services and put them in place, supporting the treatment of more than 30,000 Haitians in that context. And then food and water were immediate priorities that accounted for a large bulk of that spending. We successfully supported the distribution of food to more than 3 million people who are at risk, and had some immediate and aggressive procurements to make sure that people had as much access to water in the camps as possible. We think we successfully met the needs around water. That was a big concern in the early moments. So those have been the big areas of disaster assistance spending. And in addition to that, the Department of Defense, with its personnel and its other resources, and the Comfort Hospital ship also are cost items that we're tracking.
And going forward, Dr. Shaw, where do you feel the priorities should be now? Where is the greatest need now for the people of Haiti?
Well, the immediate needs are in two areas. One is in the collective effort to remove rubble from and other waste from critical sites, whether they are elevated sites where people could live or whether they are drainage systems that will be critical when it rains. Linked to that is shelter and sanitation. So we are aggressively pursuing those three priorities with the common goal of reaching every Haitian in need with shelter materials, first by March 8th and then with an expanded set of shelter materials by April 8th. That's probably the top and immediate priority. A second priority is public health, and we've vaccinated more than 150,000. We're trying to reach 150,000 people. I think we've reached more than 80,000 so far in advance of the rainy season.
Very good. Now, there have been some reports coming to us from Haiti that in our efforts to really move forward and help them, particularly in our food export area, and particularly in the area of rice, which is a major farming product of the farmers in Haiti. And there's been some concern that maybe our efforts to do that have undermined the basic farmers in Haiti because we've oversupplied the market and thereby putting disincentives in for the Haitian people themselves and farming to produce their own food. Can you give us an assessment of that situation, and what are we doing to make sure we correct that?
Well, thank you. I appreciate you raising it. It's an incredibly important point. What we did was initially upon sending food, we also sent some experts who could track market prices of different food commodities, including rice, vegetable oils, beans, and track the flow of charcoal and other cooking supplies in markets to make sure that we were pursuing an assistance strategy that did not impede local market systems and resilience. We've been tracking that closely. We do think we've had an aggressive response. The data on rice is varying. The data on beans and vegetable oil is that we have not had a significant price effect of that. Complementary to this effort, we've accelerated our major program to support the agriculture sector, including trying to get fertilizer support and seeds and other agricultural support out to farmers in advance of this planting season. And we will continue to track the price of rice closely to make sure we're not distorting incentives for local production. You're right to point that out as a critical issue.
So we do have effective monitoring and evaluation and measurement systems in place to measure what we're doing?
As best we can in an emergency environment. We were getting wildly different price estimates from different markets, which would not take place in a normal setting. So we're doing our best given that issue.
Thank you, and again, I commend you for your excellent work.
Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Boozman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Clinton recently stated that we hope one day to put ourselves out of the aid business because due to our success, countries will no longer need this kind of help. Can you give us some examples of how aid initiatives have been successful in permanently breaking the cycle of dependence by impoverished countries on outside aid? And also, maybe in your answer, microfinance, that's something that I have a lot of interest in.
Certainly, thank you. I think that is the long-term goal for anyone in the assistance business, which is to put ourselves out of assistance because countries effectively graduate. The most commonly cited examples are not always the most generalizable ones, like Western Europe after the World War and after the Marshall Plan, or South Korea and some other East Asian and Southeast Asian economies that were USAID beneficiaries and now are becoming donor countries. And so that is they're important examples, and we're trying to learn lessons from there to apply elsewhere. The guidance in the Spence Commission report, I think, offers a lot of interesting parallels of how we could pursue work differently in other parts of the world to achieve those outcomes. In terms of more specifically, areas like our Global Health Initiative or our Food Security Initiative are where we're trying to use that principle in a more sector-specific manner. So in global health, in a country that we prioritize, we will look at our full portfolio of activities. We will partner more deeply with countries. We'll develop a financial sustainability plan, and we will do our best to identify an exit strategy for our partners and our own financing. It may be a long exit strategy, but an exit strategy so that we're not, so that we're all aiming against that common goal on a more sector-specific basis. I appreciate you raising microfinance. This is an important area, and the ranking member also made reference to the Development Credit Authority. We recently completed a transaction that provided credit authority support to microfinance institutions through the Grameen Bank and its global network. That will leverage more than $160 million and provide institutional support to institutions around the world to put resources in the pockets of women and vulnerable populations around the world that have a surprisingly high repayment rate. And in a financial system that, even though it is banking to the poorest, it is an incredibly safe bet to make in terms of repayment rates and risks that the communities take. We're also in the microfinance area looking to expand and enhance our investments in the development of other financial services for the poor, most notably insurance products and savings products that have recent data and research have shown are critically important to reducing the vulnerability of those people to all kinds of shocks and risks that they experience in their day-to-day lives. So we appreciate your comment.
Good. Very good. One of the other things that I've experienced is in traveling to various countries, and this is certainly not true of all areas, but it does seem like there's a duplication of services. You get into turf battles, where USAID is there doing a certain function, and then you see duplicative, activities by perhaps another branch of the State Department. Do you see that as a problem? Is that something that you've experienced? And if so, how do we solve that problem? How do we get people on the same track right now with the, all of us being so aware of the finances, the limited finances that we've got? Again, I'd appreciate your comment on how we tackle that problem.
I appreciate that. There clearly are, in certain parts of the world, significant duplication of services. And what is a clear priority for us is trying to get to a place where we are prioritizing efficiency and outcome and using resources as effectively as possible. I think you do that by really three things. The first is you set very clear and specific development goals and development priorities. We are expanding our efforts to do that, both in our hiring of expertise at USAID and in developing better policy planning and evaluation systems. The second is we aspire to serve as a whole-of-government platform to point resources against those goals in an efficient and non-duplicative manner. The learnings from Haiti, I think, accelerate the need to do that. The health sector in Haiti is a good example, where we had some unique capabilities at the Department of Health and Human Services that were brought into the field, and we've been able to transition those capabilities to local NGO partners to expand their ability to provide more services to Haitians. We need more examples of that kind of partnership for effectiveness and outcome. And the third is really to focus on focus and scale as we implement our programs. And so we've restructured our policy planning to do that on a program-by-program basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The time of the gentleman has expired, and the gentlelady from California, Ambassador Watson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Shah, welcome. I have really admired your stewardship of USAID. I've been in several informational hearings with you, and you give us inspiration that this program is working well. I want to relate now to the Lantos Hyde Act, and if you remember, it mandated a 5-year strategy to treat 4.5 million cases of tuberculosis under DOTS and 90,000 multi-drug resistant TB cases. The Global Health Initiative, on the other hand, proposes to treat only 2.6 million TB patients and only 57,000 MDR TB cases. Moreover, TB will soon need new drugs to combat the rise in highly resistant TB. So what specific initiatives are planned to strengthen country responses to re-emerging infectious diseases such as TB, and how will TB treatment be incorporated into a health system strengthening approach?
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. I got my first experience in tuberculosis working on a DOTS program in rural South India a number of years ago, and recognize how critical and important this issue is and the importance of the legislative targets. I would say the distinction between the targets in terms of the 4.5, 2.6, 90, and 57,000 with respect to MDR is primarily, I believe, the distinction between what we think we can achieve in our bilateral programs with current technology and implementation protocols and what we would hope to achieve by getting more efficiencies out of the Global Health Initiative. And we can get those efficiencies in two ways. One is as we repackage our complete programs to be more systems-oriented, I fully expect, especially given the relationship between TB and HIV, that we'll actually have more resources that are currently not counting going towards the joint treatment of TB and HIV and getting those numbers up. The second is I think we will partner better with the Global Fund and do more shared system strengthening investments that would expand their capacity and ours to reach TB patients. So I believe those numbers, the 2.6 and the 57,000, are really floors upon which we can build as we get more efficient and as we partner more effectively. The second point I'd make is we will increase our research and development investments in this space. I'm particularly enthusiastic about new diagnostic technologies that I think will detect TB earlier, allowing more cases to be treated in the general platform as opposed to MDR requirements, and that would lower dramatically the cost of each treatment episode. I also believe with new drugs and treatment protocols, over time, the length of time needed to treat an MDR patient will come down significantly, potentially to as little as 9 months. And if that happens, that would significantly expand our capacities to offer treatment more broadly. So we will track these things very closely and try to learn from some of the more innovative efforts that are taking place around the world in TB.
Yeah, are you seeing TB in Haiti?
Well, we've had all kinds of reports. We have a 51 surveillance site system that the Centers for Disease Control has set up with our support tracking diseases. We have not had a big outbreak or any specific reporting in that area, but they are out there looking for it. And I did see some earlier episodes they thought were TB, but then I didn't get the follow-up that indicated it had been confirmed.
Thank you for that. The administration has stressed country ownership of aid projects, and the true meaning of this concept is really unclear to us. Words such as country-based and country-led are also in the mix, and in addition, aid is coming from a variety of sectors, GHI, PEPFAR, MC, and the Global Fund, and so forth. So can you tell us what country ownership and its many variations means to you and the administration, and how will this be reflected in your policies? And can you expand on how health initiatives will be coordinated within countries already receiving other forms of aid and keeping in mind the country ownership concept?
Well, thank you. The Global Health Initiative will include all of the investments the U.S. government makes in health in a country to achieve that goal. Quickly, the 4 components of country ownership to us are a country plan, specific guidance from countries that informs our own strategic investment, restructuring our contracts and our programs to abide by those guidances, and sharing data, information, and personnel against a common strategy and learning platform. I'm very enthusiastic about my ability to work with Tom Frieden at the CDC and Eric Gooseby at the OGAC in order to do that more effectively going forward.
We're out of time. Thank you so much.
Right, the time of the gentlelady has expired, and it is recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe in foreign aid and development because it's the right thing to do. But we're told to go to our districts and sell it as a necessary component in the war on terrorism, something we do for our national security, not just out of generosity. And frankly, if the American people were convinced that it was only altruistic, I think we'd have an even more difficult time selling foreign aid. Now, the proponents of foreign aid put forward the idea that any alleviation of poverty in the world reduces terrorism. This fits a Western morality play view of the world, because we all desperately want to live in a reasonable world And so something like terrorism must be the just and reasonable response of desperate people who are desperately poor. Unfortunately, we live in an unreasonable world. Poverty does not correlate with international terrorism. Both the Christmas Day bomber and bin Laden come from some of the richest and most powerful families in the world. And a majority of those who struck us on 9/11 come from a country that has received far more infusions of cash than USAID has ever dreamed of putting into one country or all countries, namely Saudi Arabia. They were middle and upper middle class kids from a country that gets an awful lot of American cash. Somalia is kind of a separate case, but looking at the world as a whole, the poorest 10% of the world's people cause less than 10% of the international terrorism. So simple poverty alleviation itself cannot be justified as a good investment in our in the global war on terrorism. Another problem we have is the bureaucracy at USAID. It took strong political push to get them to put the flag on the bag. They didn't want to say, this aid is from the American people. They just wanted to give out the aid. So many of your staff are people that wanted to work at Oxfam but wanted a retirement plan. What can you do to make sure that when we select the countries and the projects, when we design each part of that project, and when we publicize the efforts and decide how much resources to put into publicity rather than doing good and put the money into telling people you're doing good, that we are in fact honest with the American people that this is an effort to win the global war on terrorism and to protect them. Because as good a goal as alleviation of world poverty is, and as much as I would support it, I don't support telling the American people we're doing it to stop terrorism and then failing to select, design, and publicize so that we really are. Given your reluctant bureaucracy, what are you doing?
Thank you, sir, for that comment. I do believe that our budget presentation prioritizes the intersection of development investments in specific places and parts of specific civilian and military strategies that are designed to defeat al-Qaeda and support a stronger and more effective global security environment for our country. It's why we present our budget in the context of Afghanistan and Pakistan, where that is being carried out as a frontline state. I would also note that we've looked carefully at the data following the Indonesian tsunami that I know you were involved in with the relief effort there. The branding effort around USAID's giving in that context more than doubled our favorability rating among the Indonesian people. And in that same 6-week period after the tsunami, it actually reduced by more than half the favorability of the Indonesian people in Osama.
I have limited time. Okay. I like your answer, and I hope you'll extend it for the record. I just want to urge you to do everything you can to make sure every aspect of design and selection reflects what we're telling the American people. I want to put forward one idea, and that is, in the impoverished world, people have to pay for their kids' textbooks. If we were to print all the elementary school, middle school textbooks, we could make sure that the content, while not entirely politically correct, perhaps from an American's perspective, was good. And second, we would be helping education. And third, we would be reducing corruption, because it's pretty hard to steal and textbooks and turn them into cash, although I guess you could do it.
Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for this important hearing, and thank you, Dr. Shah, for the good work you're doing. I'm going to cover your efforts in a host of countries that we're focused in and some quick responses. Obviously, it was noted earlier about our efforts with regards to Gaza and the West Bank. How would you assess the results of the infusion thus far of aid that has been provided and the Palestinians' ability to absorb the large amount of American aid quickly?
Well, we track that very carefully before making.
No, I know
further
you noted
investments.
that earlier.
Right.
How would you assess it?
So I think there's been more success in some areas than others. There have been successes in infrastructure and the development of road networks and building schools. There have been successes in health, in particular with building a stronger health system. I think there are real challenges, especially in Gaza, where there, for a variety of reasons, have been issues with both transport and mobility of goods and individuals, as well as some interference. And so there's much to do to improve the effectiveness of those efforts, and we're working through our diplomatic channels to help improve that.
I'd like you to provide at a later date a written notice of both those challenged areas. In Afghanistan, Pakistan, obviously those are harsh environments. Many of us have visited those countries in the past. It's my understanding that USAID personnel are only there for a year at length. However, as we know, after the year ends, most people are getting their feet on the ground, getting some level of understanding of local knowledge. Do you think that's too short of a time period as they're just becoming to be experts in their field, or are you considering extending the time?
We would like to encourage staff to stay for an extended period of time. We're doing a number of things to facilitate a more effective personnel situation in Afghanistan, in particular, related to improved.
That could be an administrative change, couldn't it? I mean, if you provide the opportunity to extend beyond a year?
Well, we have to balance that with our recruiting and hiring and onboarding process, and making sure we have enough numbers.
What if an individual decides in Pakistan or Afghanistan they'd like to stay beyond a year? What's the normal course?
They absolutely can if they would like to.
Okay. As it relates to, I've had a little bit of experience with some folks from my area who have actually taken the time and contributed to build a hospital in Afghanistan outside of Kabul. I've seen where some of the other money that has been spent by us, where we've had a lot of problems with corruption. It just seems to me that we don't have it right yet in terms of whether we're building a road, whether we're building a school, whether we're building housing, or in this case, the hospital. For $2 million, they were able to build a state-of-the-art hospital in Afshar Hospital, 120 beds with seemingly no corruption that was involved. What are you guys doing to figure out how you can avoid or learn from your past mistakes?
Well, first I'll say that I'm aware of that hospital and appreciate the advance that represents and the work from members of your district. I do think our work in Afghanistan is tracked quite closely. Health is a good sector example. We were very selective in working with the Ministry of Health. It took a number of years to build the financial management and procurement system and other tracking systems to give us the confidence that we could enter into the agreement we entered into with them last year. We've now started to flow resources through that ministry, but we track every procurement action quite carefully. We monitor every strategic decision, and in addition to that, we have a series of audits that take place both from our IG and the Special Inspector General to make sure that those resources are being spent effectively. As a result of our health sector investments, we believe we've more than tripled access to the health system for Afghanistan, for the population of Afghanistan, and we think that's a tremendous achievement. We're very optimistic in that space.
Quickly, before my time expires, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see us maybe do more work as it relates to determining how well we're applying the smart power and to ensure that the money is going into the right places. Which brings me to Iraq. What would you say as we ramp down and USAID ramps up in Iraq are the lessons learned from the experience of the Department of Defense?
Well, sir, I think there are a broad range of lessons learned. Some relate to contracting and the risks of very large and poorly supervised.
And you're going to apply those lessons?
Absolutely. We have a contracting reform effort underway.
And finally, what do you think your biggest challenges are this year?
Well, our efforts in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Haiti, as well as our health and food efforts, when you put all that together, will severely strain our workforce. And so building a strong workforce and our ability to do that will be pretty critical to success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. The gentleman's time has expired, and now the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Shaw. And let me add my voice to everybody who's thanked you and the administration for the speedy response in Haiti. I represent Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we have a large Somali community there, and they're all, not all, but mostly all concerned about, what's going on in Somalia. And I realized that the U.S. reduced its funding to Somalia last year after OFAC expressed fear that the extended supply line in insurgent-heavy areas where aid agencies were operating meant that aid could be diverted to al-Qaeda-linked groups. But on the other side of the coin, the people in the UN have expressed concern about that because it results in a net reduction of food to people who need it desperately. What are the things that you think could be done to straighten this situation out? You care to offer some views on this?
Certainly, thank you. Well, first, I'll start by saying that we will follow and respect the law and the guidance around protecting and stewarding effectively U.S. resources. We've been in a very in-depth conversation with the World Food Program, and they're our primary food distribution partner, as you point out, and they have been very clear with us that this is not, that our policies are not impeding in any way their capacity to distribute food at this time. They are not distributing food more aggressively in southern Somalia for their own safety, security, and logistics capacities to do so in a difficult operating environment. So that is not the current constraint. We will work with them if that becomes the constraint, and they have the ability to distribute food that we have offered to them. If they agree to do that, then we will work with them to make sure we have a policy in place that supports those efforts.
Well, I'm going to just submit this article for the record with unanimous consent.
That objection, it'll be included in the record.
And I'll send it to you, and perhaps we can flesh out a stronger answer, because I would like to get to the bottom of this, because it seemed that there was some sort of a technical requirements that were being restricted, and I'm sure you're aware of the complaint. It sounds like you're saying that it's maybe not a valid complaint, but we'll.
No, okay, I'm sorry. What I was suggesting is we've worked through that, and they're now in a different circumstance. And the circumstance they're in right now, and we're in very direct communication.
That's great.
Is that that's not an operating issue anymore.
That's great. Great. Next is, thank you for the work that you do to support the people in Gaza. Do you think that USAID could be more effective at its work if USAID personnel were able to enter Gaza? Have you reviewed a process by which USAID personnel might actually be able to enter and not just work through surrogates?
Well, as a general principle, we do believe that our presence allows for improved effectiveness. We are reviewing a broad range of things we can do to improve the operations in Gaza that include working with partner agencies, UN agencies more aggressively, working the diplomatic channels to reduce some of the issues.
Forgive me, sir. I'm sorry, Doctor. The USAID is working through surrogates now. That's already happening.
Yeah.
I want to know, do you think it would be an advantage to having USAID personnel in Gaza, since we're already in other tough areas like Afghanistan, Iraq, and others?
Well, I think the core constraint for us right now is actually mobility, getting items in, and a series of specific issues with respect to interference from Hamas and others in that environment. In that context, it's not clear that sending our people in is the immediate resolution to that. I think the immediate resolution to that is solving those problems as a precondition for that, and so we're working with others to do that. I'm happy to review this more specifically, though, and come back to you with a more specific answer.
Yeah, and there are. USAID does operate in Gaza, and do you feel that the UNRWA is doing all it can to keep materials and supplies away from Hamas?
Well, we believe UNRWA is an incredibly important partner and needs to be successful at their efforts, and so we work in coordination with them. I think we all can do a better job in any number of things in Gaza, which is a very difficult operating environment for the reasons that I was identifying.
Thank you, Doctor.
Time of the gentleman has expired, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. McMahon, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director. It's good to see you again, and I'm sure I want to join in that chorus of all those who have thanked you and your agency for the great work you're doing in Haiti and responding to that issue, that emergency there as well. And I know the people of Chile need your assistance as well, and America is doing that. And once again, you kind of put a little polish on the reputation of our country and being able to respond in an effective manner. And that's something that the American people are grateful for. I also want to thank you for your assistance in allowing the New York City Search and Rescue Team to get down there to Haiti. And as you know, we put in a resolution recently under the chairman's leadership commending USAID and the civilian emergency response team as well as the military response team, and we're grateful for that. Dr. Shah, I want to follow up a little bit on the Gaza questions that my colleague from Minnesota was asking. The President's request included $400.4 million in economic assistance for the West Bank and Gaza to, quote, strengthen the Palestinian Authority as a credible partner in Middle Eastern peace and continue to respond to humanitarian needs in Gaza. The request also states that this assistance will, quote, provide significant resources to support the stability of the Palestinian Authority, economic development of the West Bank, and increase the capacity of the Palestinian Authority to meet the needs of its people. Dr. Shah, I would like to reiterate the importance of vetting this funding and, of course, supporting Israel. Just yesterday, the UN's Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs, John Holmes, dismissed Hamas's cross-border raid in 2006, the kidnapping of Staff Sergeant Gilad Shalit, and Hamas's unacceptable calls for Israel's destruction by condemning Israel. Of course, he completely neglected mentioning the fact that despite Hamas's aggression, Israel allows daily shipments of food, medicine, and other supplies. Given these statements, and to follow up again to my colleague from Minnesota, how will USAID make sure that this funding does not end up in the hands of terrorists, specifically when we are partnering with organizations like UNRWA? What sort of safeguards are in place? And if you could be as specific as possible. And also, if you could provide an assessment of the effectiveness of U.S. aid to the Palestinians over the past several years. Which economic projects have been effective and which have not? Has U.S. assistance helped increase popular support for moderate Palestinians in the West Bank, a goal which we all support? And what role is the United States aid playing in helping to strengthen governing institutions in the West Bank? Basically, are we making a positive impact?
Thank you for those comments with respect to Haiti and the questions with respect to Gaza and the West Bank and Israel. We do have, as I noted, we have a very rigorous system for vetting partners and for tracking any cash disbursements all the way through to their end use. On partner vetting, we have a very sophisticated system. It's been in place for more than 2 years that tracks the names of all our partners, that clearly vets all key personnel in any partner organization against a larger database, and that allows us to follow up on any positive hits that occur in that tracking system. After we get any positive hits, we have an aggressive process of investigation and review before going forward. So that's a very robust system. The cash tracking system is similarly robust. We track any authorized disbursements. We transfer resources through an Israeli-based banking account into a special treasury account in a Palestinian bank, and then we monitor all flows out of that account by every single disbursement being tracked specifically to its end use. Most of these disbursements nearly all of these disbursements are used to pay off creditors, so those resources go back out to other places. The question with respect to how are we coordinating with other partners and what can we do to improve effectiveness, I'll just say I spoke to John Holmes before he went to make the point that you were making, that our goal is about effectiveness in that environment and that we need to look at the whole picture. It is the PRM program that primarily partners with UNRWA and not USAID, although we believe that that is an important partnership going forward. So we'll continue to have those safeguards in place. On effectiveness, there's some areas we think have been more effective than others. Health and education have been perhaps more effective than the full portfolio of infrastructure investments, which are more complex to implement, although there have been some success stories there as well in the West Bank in particular. In Gaza, with mostly humanitarian mission, it's a different operating environment.
Time of the gentleman has expired, and in an impressive show of efficiency of time, Mr. Conley, within 8:45 seconds after entering the room, is recognized for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I'm late, but we had a weekly breakfast meeting with the speaker and the freshman class, and it went a little bit over. So please forgive me, Dr. Shah, for coming in so late, and I thank the courtesy of the chairman for allowing me to continue nonetheless. Dr. Shah, one of the concerns I certainly have, and I know other members of the committee do as well, is that in some ways USAID has been hollowed out in the last decade. I would hope that part of your mission is to turn that around. We had Secretary Clinton here in her first appearance before the committee. She's been here since, who certainly committed to doing that. But we've seen, for example, a proliferation of aid-related missions that are not, however, part of USAID. The Millennium Project and the AIDS Project and on and on. I would even argue that an awful lot of the funds that are used by the military in Afghanistan and Iraq really ought to be projectized aid, and they're being managed by our military, and hopefully well, but those sums are now so substantial, one is concerned about what could go wrong and would maybe preferably have them in the hands of professionals. I wonder if you could address that subject, that whole question of how do we consolidate, how do we make sure that you're the go-to person for bilateral and multilateral U.S. assistance, and that we remake AID into a cutting-edge development agency that actually does something and isn't just a place that facilitates contracts with others.
Thank you very much for that comment and that statement. I believe that right now is an incredibly unique time to seize the opportunity to rebuild AID as the world's premier development agency. I think we have a president and a secretary and an administrator completely committed to that goal, and we have such strong leadership and support in the congressional committees and in Congress to achieve that outcome. I also believe development is a discipline, and I think it is a professional discipline that needs to benefit constantly from the learnings of the past and the learnings of the present, and we need to represent excellence in the practice of that discipline on behalf of all development activities. Our game plan for reestablishing our effectiveness and our transparency, our accountability, and our operational excellence is really to focus on a handful of strategic priorities. We'll focus our work in Afghanistan and Pakistan and try to show clear results against clear strategic metrics. In Haiti and in our series of key issues like health, food security, and climate change. In each of these areas, USAID can show through restructuring how we do our work that we can have more impact for less, that we can serve as a whole-of-government platform that invites in other partners in a manner that's directed against specific goals and specific outcomes, and that makes tough choices about how we use resources so we get the most bang for buck in our spending, as we've tried to do in the relief effort around Haiti. We're also pursuing a set of operational improvements, and I want to thank the Congress for its leadership in allowing us to have the Development Leadership Initiative and rebuild the actual Foreign Service Corps of this agency, which you're right to point out has been decimated over the past 15 years. We think we have a strong position. We have more than 4,000 Foreign Service nationals that represent people with PhDs and medical degrees and are entirely capable leaders that any other private company would think of as a tremendous core asset for a more globally interconnected world. We need to rebuild our Foreign Service. We're doing that at the mid-career technical level, and we're doing that through the DLI.
If I may interrupt you, because my time is going to run out, but count me as an ally in that effort.
Thank
the
you.
Lead development agency, as far as I'm concerned, for the United States government, has to be USAID, not the State Department. You're the hands-on guys. You're the people with the experience, and you just enumerated that, and that's what we had to work with. In my 49 seconds left, one thing I just want to sort of put in your cap. USAID does provide funding both to NDI and IRI through various spigots. One of the concerns I've had about their work is that democratization works from the bottom up, not the top down. I'd like to see a much enhanced effort at working with local governments in those programs. Quite frankly, I think we haven't done such a good job over the years in doing that. We've tried, but it's a hard mechanism. But they're going to take their lead from where the money flows, and I would hope that you take a look at that, because I think we have to, if we really mean it about democratization, the place you build that is at the local level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is up.
Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. I thank him for echoing some of my sentiments on these issues, an unusual occurrence. Given the time, if it's all right with you, I'm going to recognize myself. Oh, well, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Rohrbacher is here. You are next, Mr. Rohrbacher.
Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much aid have we provided to Afghanistan since 2001?
I'm not sure the precise number since 2001.
Well, how much are we providing this year?
Well, this year we're proposing in the FY 2011 budget that we would be spending $3.9 billion. That's down from $4.4 billion in 2010 when you include the supplemental amount with the enacted amount.
Okay. And how much will we be providing Iraq?
I believe that is going down as well from $700 million to around $400 million, but I'll double check those numbers for you.
So with Iraq, it's going to be 400. And what are some of the programs we're spending $400 million for in Iraq?
Which programs are our priorities in Iraq?
Right.
We have, well, our immediate priority is support for the elections and successfully completing the elections. We're also supporting the potential government transitions and ministries through support contracts that will work in the aftermath that are currently up and running, but will also continue through that critical 4 to 6 month period after the election. And in addition to that, we have a number of programs in health and education, economics, and agriculture in particular.
Do you have the figures with you in terms of how much we have spent, how much aid has been spent in Iraq since the liberation?
No, I'm not at the top of my fingertips, but I will follow up on that.
Maybe you could tell us of the almost $4 billion, $3.9 billion that will be spent in Afghanistan. What are some of the programs that Afghanistan will be receiving?
Sure. Well, we have restructured our Afghanistan portfolio to be aligned with and very much a part of the President's Afghanistan strategy. We had 2 major strategic reviews in March of last year and in December when the President's strategy was announced by the President. The priorities going forward are agriculture, which is the largest employer of individuals outside of the government in Afghanistan. Our investments there have peaked this year at around $820 million, will come down to $425 million in the 2011 spending, but that continued pipeline of investment will be the single greatest investment in the productivity sectors in agriculture, and we're encouraged by some of the early outcomes with respect to performance in that sector. We also have major investments and will continue with major investments in health and education. The health sector is a sector where we're partnering closely with the Ministry of Health. It's been a number of years in the makings to develop a really robust partnership with strong auditing trails and financial accountability for our spending. And our priorities are on building a effective tertiary care health system, an effective primary care health system, and getting health access out into rural areas to serve the needs of women and children in particular, to most effectively reduce some of the disproportionate health harms in that context. We have a broader range of activities in partnership with other departments and the State Department that include security, rule of law, counter-narcotics, but the aid-administered programs will focus in the areas I described. Other economic growth priorities include roads and power as well.
Have we had, so how much did you say being spent on agriculture?
We have, well, the FY 2010, when you include the supplemental, is around 820, and the FY 2011 request is around 425. That's agriculture and food security, and including alternative livelihoods in rural communities, not including counter-narcotic activities.
Not including
Not including counter-narcotic.
And could you give us an example of some of the agricultural spending that we've got?
Sure. We have programs. Well, first we work in close partnership with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where they're providing significant technical support to the ministries and the public sector system, and we're very focused on supporting the private sector. We have farmer support programs that are getting seed and fertilizer out to farmers through a voucher-based private sector system. We have programs to help farmers produce high-value products like apples and then export them in the region so they have sources of cash and income in addition to the production of basic foodstuffs. And we're working to develop improved access to agricultural credit so that farmers can really support their own pathway out of poverty through agricultural development.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. I'm going to recognize myself for 3 minutes and Mr. Smith for 3 minutes. And I just want to follow up a little more specifically on some of the points raised by my colleague from Virginia. In the context of what the Secretary has referred to as a key foreign policy priority, that is development and rebuilding USAID as an institution, specifically, could you talk about the restoration of a budget development capacity and a policy planning capacity within AID, and also your in the rebuilding of the staff with the goal of doubling the number of Foreign Service officers through the Development Leadership Initiative, your priorities for hiring and recruitment of new people at AID.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a strong effort underway through the QDDR to partner some of our new staff with the members of the F Bureau to identify really a revised and improved budget process that would allow USAID to be financially accountable for the resources it spends. It goes without saying that in order to be the world's premier development agency, we have to be able to account for our spending and be held to account for resources that are spent in a transparent and clear manner. And so we're actively working on that through the QDDR and through other processes. On the policy,
what about on the impact of developing the accountability is very important, but the question is, are you handed a budget, or do you get to develop a budget?
We will get to a place where we have the opportunity to develop a budget, working in partnership with others. But we clearly need to be able to make strategic resource trade-offs in order to be held accountable for the performance of the agency. On policy planning, similarly, sir, we are building an active policy planning capacity. I'm pleased to announce we've had real leaders in the field like Ruth Levine from the Center for Global Development that just joined our team. We hope to have a world-class, innovative evaluation capacity that helps us learn from direct program beneficiaries through text messaging, all the way through doing a range of other efforts to do randomized controlled program trials to understand the impact of our work most effectively and rebuild our policy planning and evaluation capacities. On staff, we've now hired in 420 individuals through the DLI. We respect the great leadership Congress has provided. My priorities are to sort of re-look at how we do deployments and more rapidly deploy the DLI individuals to our core strategic and operational priorities and shorten the length of time that they're in the current training program.
My time has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Shah, as you know, WHO estimates that up to 70% of health care in Africa is provided by faith-based organizations. The Catholic health care alone in Africa constitutes about 40%. We know that a number of other groups, Samaritan's Purse, World Vision, others are all doing yeoman's work there. They provide expertise, infrastructure, trust of the people, and an enormous number of volunteers that otherwise might not be utilized, and their ability to expand is incredible. What is your view of increasing the partnership with faith-based organizations and NGOs, especially as it relates to implementing the Global Health Initiative?
Thank you for that observation. I believe that the partnerships and bringing those partnerships into a whole health system construct will be critical to the effectiveness of the Global Health Initiative. So I would see whether it's in Kenya or other countries where there are significant faith-based organizations running hospitals and doing that work, and where we're involved in providing support. Our goal is to bring that support within the context of the health system and to make those more formally part of an integrated national health plan. So it absolutely involves expanding and deepening our partnership.
Now, I would hope you'd be mindful that in some countries where church opposition to human rights abuses have been very strong, when integrated in partnerships and are formed, and the government, health ministries, and others might be less than quick to want to embrace the faith-based community, I would hope that we would play a very positive role in suggesting, when it comes to health care, we want the maximum impact, and it seems to me, and I know in places, and I've been throughout Africa, usually when there's corruption or human rights abuse by a dictatorship or an authoritarian regime, it's reflected in other parts of that government when it comes to partnering. So they shun those partnerships in some instances. So I would hope that we would help to overcome that.
Thank you. We will.
And finally, in 40 seconds, in reading the micro-enterprise results reporting, I understand that there's some real problems with meeting the 50% goal of meeting or providing microfinancing to the poorest of the poor. Could you take a second look at how we might be able to reach out to those NGOs that are actually meeting we had a big fight when we did the reauthorization in 2004, and I know because that was my bill. And there is a lot of tugs and give and take, but when it comes to the NGOs that are there on the ground providing maximum benefit to the poorest of the poor, the goal is a real one. I think it's achievable, so please take a second look at that.
We will.
Time of the gentleman is expired because of the service for our late colleague, Congressman Murtha. We are going to adjourn the hearing. We thank you very much for being here. We look forward very enthusiastically to working with you in the future. Markup tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and the committee hearing is adjourned. Thank you.